Hey everybody, it's Holly from the Leadr team, and today I'm joined by Ed Applegate, who's the executive pastor at Crossroads Grace Church. Ed, we are so grateful to have you here and hear your story and your leader story. So that's what I would love to start off with, is just to hear from you. Tell us about Crossroads Grace and your role on the team there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Crossroads Grace is a 30-year-old church plant. We were started by our founding pastor, 17 people in a home in a town called Manteca, which means lard in Spanish. So that's a really great place to plant a church, right? So, but we're 33 years old now. We have, pre-COVID, we're about a church of about 2,500, 32 staff. And my role, I've been on staff for 15 years. My role shifted a little bit over the years, but for the last 2.5 years, I've been the executive pastor. So
That's amazing. And I can only imagine, even those 2.5 years as executive pastor, you've probably had to wear all of the hats through this crazy season that we've been walking through with COVID and quarantine. Man,
yeah,
it's a lot.
it's been a fun time. It's been some of the biggest challenges, but it's been such a great experience as a team and brought us so close together as a team. And I just love our team and what we get to do together. So yeah.
That's awesome. Well, you just mentioned it's been a season full of big challenges. So I would love to hear from you as you are thinking about leading your team and developing your team. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've been facing?
Well, I would say some of the biggest challenges are alignment and communication and clarity. Whether it's during COVID or just in regular times, those are probably some of the biggest things that shape your culture and help you as an organization. And we're no different in that, especially when we went remote or we've had different times of being in person and that kind of thing, just maintaining alignment and clarity and communication. And what made it hard for us, just as we talk about Leadr and talk about systems, is that we had different teams using all sorts of different systems, whether it be, Basecamp or Google or Asana, and they loved those things, and it was great. But how do you bring alignment when everybody's using different tools? So we were working hard to work on communication and clarity, and those kind of things. But it was hard because everybody's using different tools in the midst of that. So that's been some of our challenges, as to like, how do we bring that alignment and clarity in those kind of times? So
That's so good. You made a great comment there where you were like, even in normal, quote unquote, normal times,
yeah,
all those things you said are hard, right? Because
yeah,
teams are full of people, and people, we've got to just make sure we're all pointed in the same direction. And alignment
yeah.
is always hard. And then you add a global pandemic to it. And that just, really makes everything harder. So that's a great point of like, no matter what, this is always a challenge. So as you were thinking about those challenges and considering different solutions, what were you thinking about as you were looking to make your team more aligned and focused and increase your communication?
Yeah, well, I was looking for something that everybody would be on board with, like that we would together as a team. Some of the challenges, like when you hire new people, is like, well, how do I communicate with people? And
Mhm.
and it's like, well, if you can't say this is the tool we use to communicate, this is the tool we use to make sure everybody knows what's going on, to bring alignment, then it's so much more difficult. And so I was looking for something that people would really, together as a team, we would use. And so the Asanas and the base camps and the other things would kind of go away, and we would have alignment together as a team.
Yeah. So when you were looking at those different tools, what stuck out to you about Leader? Because it sounds like you guys were using, you mentioned Basecamp, you mentioned Asana and Google.
Yeah.
Why not just like double down on one of those options that you're already using?
Yeah, well, what stuck out to me about Leader right away was just the simplicity of it, that it was just so easy to use. That right away it looked good and it felt good, and you could just, without really much of an introduction, you could kind of navigate your way around the whole thing. And that's really important when it comes to like having different team members who some are more tech savvy than others. And when you hire new people and you're training and all of those kind of considerations, like to have something that is very, or that you can get up to speed with really quickly is important. But then as you dive a little deeper into Leadr, and you've got it's like a all-in-one shop. You've got you've got meetings, and those are one-on-ones or teams. You've got action items and library of learning and feedback and reviews, and then HR stuff. And it's just like, in a world where there's so many different solutions I, as an executive pastor, and as I'm responsible for like our infrastructure, I wanted something that was simple, and was more one product, rather than, hey, we use this for this, and we use this for this, and we use this for this. And it's already hard enough for people, and so the more simplicity, but I didn't feel like in any way I was compromising by that either. So I didn't feel any way of like, well, we'll settle for this. Leadr, I just felt like just answered all the questions I was asking and brought it together in one place.
That's awesome. I mean, even for me, I have so much trouble remembering logins to so many different tools, right? It's like just password memorization alone. It's helpful to have it all in one place.
Yeah. And
that's awesome.
Seat time they used to talk about, well, like hours flying. If you're a pilot, like they add up your hours flying, because the hours in a plane shows you have experience and more and more the more time you do it. If you're in one program more and more and more, that seat time, you get more familiar with it, you use it more effectively. And so to have one solution that you spend most of your time in makes much more sense than I'm trying to learn this program and this thing and this thing. And your seat time in each of those is automatically reduced. And so just to, and when you think of a team who have all sorts of different abilities and preferences to technology, for them to be able to have seat time amassed in one solution, just means that us as a team are going to be more effective in using it. So
that's so good. That's awesome. So let's think back. You guys were Crossroads Grace was one of our first customers. And so you all have been with us for a little over a year. So I would love to hear about, kind of pre-Leadr and post-Leadr with your team. Tell me about your team before and after Leadr and the changes that you've noticed and the growth and development of your team.
Absolutely. Like I would say, pre-Leadr, we were just as passionate about our mission. And we were growing and developing, but it wasn't, like you said earlier, it wasn't aligned. And our communication, we would break down in all sorts of different times. And I would say that like the effectiveness of one-on-ones wasn't happening as well as it should have been. The deeper the organization got, the less and less effective those got. And so as we brought Leadr in, it brought, and we said, hey, this is what we're going to use, and you're going to use it for your one-on-ones, and you're going to use it in your teams. It brought that alignment to the teams, that, hey, here's the place where we can remember what we said. Here's where I can add agenda items so that we can be prepared for meetings, instead of just like turning up and going, oh, what's on the agenda today? And so it empowers our admins to set agendas with their supervisors. It empowers our teams to kind of collaborate on those agendas. And then it helps team members, if they miss a meeting, they know where to go to read about that. So that's some of the helpfulness, and so instead of like maybe being a little bit of a limp in our step, like we know where we're going, we know what we're doing, but we're limping a little bit, it's helped us limp a little less and move forward faster because we're aligned better.
That's so good. I love hearing that. So for anybody that's watching this, that's currently considering Leadr, what would you tell them if they're like, man, we really love the idea of this, but we're feeling a little bit overwhelmed about how to roll this out to our team. You've been with
Yeah,
Leadr for over a year now. What's your
yeah.
advice to that leader out there?
Well, the best piece of advice I would say is have a demo with as many of your top leaders as you think you could bring in on the decision. I
Mm,
think they're going to love the program, but their ownership of the decision will make a big difference to uh, adoption and the rollout of the program. If you just make the call on your own, or just a couple of you in your organization, um, and people don't fill in on it, it might be a little longer of a process. One of my favorite, the thing that probably sold me on I was sold on Leadr when I saw it as an executive pastor. But when our worship pastor sat in on a demo and said, man, this is really cool. Like, I really like this. Like, I was totally sold. Like, if your creative guy is in on a software, like, then yeah, get that. You
yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
That's so good.
um, but it means that now he was part of that decision, and so he owns it as well as we own it. And um, so that's probably the best piece of advice as you're considering it, is bring other people into that decision. Um,
Mm,
but I would also just think about those people you haven't hired yet, and what does it feel like to onboard into your system, and and what are the challenges of that? They're calling this year the Great Resignation, and there's transitions and all that, and we think a lot about our onboarding. And if you've got a ton of different programs or solutions that you're using, that's just a steep learning curve. And I think the fact that Leadr is a your one-stop shop is a big factor in considering it. So that's what I would kind of pass on as my couple of pieces of advice.
That's so good. Yeah. So for any senior executive pastors that are watching this, from Ed Applegate, if your worship pastor once is all in, then get that. I love
Get
it. That was
that.
so good.
Get that. Yeah.
Well, Ed, I'm going to throw a curveball at you real quick and
Sure.
say, put you on the spot and say, okay, what of all of the features and bells and whistles inside Leadr, what's your favorite feature?
My favorite. Oh gosh. Um, Man, there's so many things I love. Um, I think my favorite feature is being able to find a learning, like a video that I want my team to consider, being able to customize some questions for them to answer in advance, and then we get to sit down together in a one-on-one after, and discuss together that learning. And
Mm,
so it brings together a few things. It brings together, one, development, obviously, some debrief time on their own, that they can think
yes.
about answers to the questions, which we need some discipline in that, right? We need somebody to help us, and Leadr makes that really easy. And then it brings a chance for me as a supervisor to see what somebody's thinking, and then we can have a real conversation around that. So I think it's just, I think that's probably one of my favorite features of it. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. Bringing it full circle, not just sending that podcast or video or blog
Yep.
out there into cyberspace, but really closing the loop and having a conversation about it. That's so good.
Yep.
Well, Ed, thank you so much for being one of our first Leadr customers and for sharing your
Awesome.
stories so that we can help
Awesome.
more organizations. And we at the Leadr team are so thankful for you and are cheering you on.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Holly.